Hello, you beautiful people. Welcome to another episode of the Roaring Agents podcast. I'm very happy today. I've got Stewart. Been wanting to get her on for a while. Schedules didn't match, but now she's here. She is I think, 4-time icon agent with EXP. She's a top producer in the Portland market. She's been in it. She went through the Great Recession, all that. So there's some good insight we're going to have there. So happy to have you on, Ann.
Oh, thanks, Mike. It's so good to finally connect and be able to do this.
Well, we get to talk a lot on Instagram and we share stats and insights and ask each other's opinion about things. So it's been fun. So I'm glad we get to have this opportunity now. So what is working for you now in this crazy market?
I know we always refer to it as a crazy market. I would say just really having a lean and mean setup in my team structure, in my the way we're doing business. I feel like just there's been an evolution of our team in the last year, and it's all been for the better. It's really gotten me, I think, to a point where we're in this market where nobody really knows what's going to happen. It seems like month by month, like one minute we're having multiple offers, the next minute it's like quiet. Agents are constantly coming to me and saying their business is not where they want it to be, and I just feel like, at least with my team, we've kind of set it up where we are productive, profitable, and purposeful. That's the 3 Ps is kind of what I refer to it as. We're still doing a great amount of production. We obviously, numbers are down for everybody, but I think we're going to end the year up, at least on our team, higher than last year.
Wow.
How much is unknown. We'll see how the next few months go. We've got one more quarter left. But just the structure, my administrative staff looks very different. I'm using virtual assistant, which has been incredible. I can't say enough great things about having a virtual assistant, which, I know we've all heard of them. People are using them here and there, or maybe haven't, but it's really changed my business dramatically. And just having a licensed transaction coordinator that is, works on realtor hours, and it's not necessarily on payroll. But yeah, just doing purposeful things like, what we do with our business. Like we've cut out a lot of fat. We're just doing the things that work, and we're going deeper in on that. And I think this year has been so up and down for what's going to happen next, and I'm just really grateful that we have it set up the way we do.
You're one of the handful of agents that I've talked to whose business is going to be about the same as it was last year or better. Most people are talking about that it's down equal to the market, which would make sense.
Yeah.
Why do you think that you've been able to beat the market going down and be able to take more share?
I had no expectation that I would have any, I expected to have a down year, I kind of felt like last year was our down year. So maybe it's all kind of relative, but, I think, like I said, we're keeping it really simple. It's like relationships matter more than ever. Skills matter more than ever. I think I feel really grateful that I have the skill set that I learned from many moons ago, that, I don't have a problem having really challenging conversations with sellers and clients about what they need to do to really make things happen in this market. And you have to work harder in some areas of the business than you had before. I really enjoy this market. Maybe I'm crazy for saying that, but I just feel like I'm able to really represent people in a fiduciary manner better than I've ever been able to do that. Because it feels like the last several years was just, I felt like all you had to do is put on your running shoes and run this fast race. And, it was just a very, different type of market than it is now. And now it's like, this is the market for the skill based and the agents that, know the numbers like you do. That's why I love leaning on you for the numbers, because I think people are looking for value. They're looking for, what the heck's going on out there? When a seller calls me and says, I need to sell my house, do you think this is a good time to sell? And do you think I can get this amount of money? Or how long is it going to take? Or, what's going on? Like, I feel like I can have really good conversations with people about the data and help them understand what they need to do to really get sold.
You said the thing about the skills. What we're seeing a lot is agents who got in the business in the last 3 years with COVID. And it's kind of like the fish jumping into the boat for them sometimes. And then they're coming to this skills-based situation and like, they don't have the skills. We joked last year that having that conversation with the seller about dropping their price was no one had that conversation with the seller in the previous
Right.
2 years.
Yeah.
Looking back, do you think, going through the Great Recession really honed a lot of those skills?
100%. Like it's, I dusted off the toolbox when I saw last year that things were changing, and they changed fast last year. I felt like last year was so hard to catch up with what was happening. It was like every month the interest rates were going up dramatically, prices were adjusting, people were just uncertain. Last year felt to me more difficult because we switched so fast from a market of multiple offers and selling fast and getting prices that were, insane, to instantly overnight, the game had changed and nobody knew where it was yet. It was like, well, should I lower my price? Should I, what's working, what's not working? And it was just like catching your breath as an eight. Luckily, I could go back to my toolbox of, the last recession. And I was like, yep, now we need to have a different conversation. I remember having all these conversations I'm having now back then, which is, obviously helpful to have that kind of, history in the real estate market. It's not the same recession by any means, but the conversations are very similar in what needs to have happen to help a seller understand where they need to be positioned, or even a buyer, because the buyers are now, more leery about, is this a good time to buy? Should I take on this higher payment, higher interest rate? What happens if I don't? So yeah, I mean, for me, it's very familiar. It's comfortable in a weird way. Like I don't have any problems having these conversations with sellers. And I'm actually coaching an agent right now that she just really wants to learn how to have these conversations and what to do. And so I applaud agents that are really trying to build the skill set quickly in this market, because they're going to need to. Like I just see a lot of agents kind of flailing and trying to figure it out. But this is really the market for skills. So
What are you telling that agent as far as, what's the basic things to approach these conversations?
it's knowing the market and knowing how to speak to it and having those conversations where it's not, I think a lot of agents get really defensive in this market about their value or where the house should be priced or what's really happening. And it's not about that. You have to get immediately on the same page with your client and know that like they're hiring you to tell them the truth and to tell them exactly what they need to do to get the job done. And it's getting over your own biases and fears and allowing yourself to say, I am going to consult this person into understanding what's happening out here, and then allowing them to make a decision on their own. I think a lot of times agents think that we have to force somebody to price it a certain way, or that, we're going to be duking heads with our own clients about what's going to happen. That's not it at all. It's really about having those conversations where you truly are the consultant. Like if they're hiring you to tell them exactly what they need to do, that you're setting the stage for, this is exactly what we need to do, and here's the data to back it up, and here's how we're going to work together to get this done. And so, agents have always been afraid of like talking about pricing and all this stuff because it's uncomfortable, right? This is somebody's biggest asset. And I was there many moons ago before the recession, but when it came to the last recession, you had to learn how to talk to people about really difficult conversations that could be, hey, you might even go into foreclosure or short sale status if we don't do this right. That's not this market. We're not seeing that happen, thankfully, but we're still having to have those really intentional conversations with clients that matter so that they know they can make the right decisions, and they know they have the faith and the confidence in the agent they're hiring to tell them what they need to do.
Some agents will take on overpriced listings just because they want to have a sign in the ground, whatever. What's your take on those situations?
My take is, if a seller has to sell and they're motivated to get the job done, as long as you're my whole thing with representation of a client is like, after I show you all the data and we have conversations about what I think they should do in terms of pricing and strategy, and they decide to still place the price higher than my belief is it should be, allow that person to do it, but not for very long. Give them the opportunity to explore that, but have a strategy and a conversation up front about, hey, if this doesn't sell or we're not getting the showings in the first week or two on market, that we can readdress this conversation and reposition that price. I've got a seller right now. She felt very compelled that her price should be starting at a different price than I did. That's okay. Like, it's her house. I know what side of the table I sit on. I don't own it, but she still hired me to tell her what to do. And I told her, if you want to try that price, then we'll do that. But we're going to have a conversation within the first week. We're going to figure out if that's going to make it or not make it. And I told her there's definite signs when you're out of the realm of pricing that happen that I'm going to share with you as we go through this process. And I always say, is it okay if I'm honest with you and direct? Because we're on the same side of the table when it comes to selling the house and getting the job done. So I'm not one to not bring up the conversation. You know, I'm going to be the one to make the phone call and say, hey, it's time to talk about what we need to do to reposition the price so we can be effective in this market. And I haven't had too much trouble with sellers in that regard at all. Oftentimes they appreciate the fact that I'm allowing them their, moment with the price, but that we're going to make an adjustment pretty quickly. Most of the time, the sellers understand that there's no exact science to this. There's a high, there's a low, and there's a medium price point for every house, right? Sometimes I say, gosh, there are conditions on point. They're a really nice listing. There's something unique or edgy about the house that I know buyers out there are looking for. So we can kind of price it at the top of that price range and oftentimes get the pricing that we're hoping for. Other times I feel more compelled to tell them, hey, you need to price it right in the sweet spot because here's what's going on with the inventory in your area, the days on market. And then there's been a few cases this year where I've had a handful of listings that they don't have the time or the resources to really, truly get the property ready for market in the way it needs to be to get fair market value or more. And we agree going in that we're going to sell it maybe as is, or we're going to price it on the lower side so that we can give the market that we're giving a compelling enough price where somebody knows they might have to put some cosmetic updates or some conditional things in the property. And that's worked out too. And I think it's just having that cadre of conversation around, how do you want to go about this? Do you want to do everything I tell you to do to get this house absolutely ready and dialed to maintain or get the top value for what it could get? Or are you somewhere in the middle of the road, or maybe you just have zero time, zero resources to do anything, and we need to really price it to give the market the difference so they can come in and see the value, even though they might be buying something that's not turnkey.
One of the things I love about you is that you have, you don't just say the things that all the other real estate agents say. You are authentic, you're honest, you kind of have a, there's just some things all agents say. Market's fantastic or whatever. And you're like, no, this market sucks. Or like you said, actually a market crash is probably better than if first-time home buyers could never buy a house. Mm-hmm. Those kind of things. And I think that's one of the things that really works for you, especially on TikTok. And I wanted to talk about that. I went through your TikToks and you have one that's 1.3 million views. It's the one about things are shifty. And you started off shifty poo-poo, which I loved, but that's the authenticity. Some other ones were about the rate drop, about a 1031 exchange mistake or a whoopsie, I think you called it. The one that I found really interesting was, I think it was, you said a real pickle, and it's about this girl, Emily, who was talking about being priced out of the market and all this. You had 144,000 views, 450 saves. You actually had more views than she did. You had more saves than she did. You took a video that was already kind of popular or whatever, and you actually outranked her. So it's interesting. So with all that said, what got you into TikTok? And then also, what do you think you've done that's made it work so well for you?
So I got into TikTok because I have a teenage son who showed me it one day, and I was like, I'm never getting on that app. That is for like kids. I had no idea what it was. So I was kind of a voyeur when I first started. I thought there's nobody my age category on there. There's no realtors, whatever. But early 2022, I really started kind of posting raw videos. So we have Instagram, obviously. We get business off Instagram, but it's a much more curated platform, whereas TikTok, you can just hop on and start talking how you normally talk, and the app really receives that well. So it was right when the market was starting to shift last year when I started getting on and doing some pretty, talking about it. And it quickly took off. I had some viral videos. I gained followers really fast. I had no idea that was even going to happen. And then like the summertime, we started having reach outs from clients on there or prospective people. And long story short, we've gotten quite a bit of business off of it, but it's an app or a social platform that it really allows you just to speak your mind. At least that's what I have found has been really successful on there. I don't curate anything on there. I just get on and start talking. Sometimes it's really silly, stories. Other times it's how I feel about a certain topic in real estate, but I keep it mostly about real estate. And TikTok is probably one of the smartest social apps that exists, whether you like it or not. Their algorithm really does put you in front of people that you would have never known before. And whereas on Instagram, it's people you already know or maybe kind of know. Yeah, you can build followers from people you don't know, but they mainly focus your content on people that already know you and like you and trust you. Whereas TikTok is a completely different, it's the whole world basically, and it's very intelligent. And so it's just really allowed us to have another voice, I guess, on a social platform that's very interactive, and allowed us to build a lot of relationships really quickly.
Do you go into it like trying to strategize, trying to, make it go viral, or you're just like, this is what I'm thinking, this is what I'm going to say?
No, I mean, I think the way I put out content naturally kind of works for the algorithm. It's like you want to make it topical, maybe have something that's interesting to start off with in terms of a hook. But it really is just about real estate. I mean, honestly, like the thing that's so interesting is like, just be yourself is really the name of the game on TikTok, because that content really, and stay consistent, be yourself and talk about the topics that you're good at knowing, which is real estate for me, and I feel like I can be sort of direct and raw and authentic in my own way because it's just an easier platform to do that with. And you build an audience so fast with that. I've built so many relationships on that app. It's crazy. I would have never known in a million years that TikTok would have been so powerful. I was actually interviewed by the Washington Post, and they wrote an article like just last week because of the guy that reached out to me as a journalist for the Washington Post and wrote an article, and so I've met realtors from all different brokerages all over the country on that app that I consider myself friends with. We've had tons of clients come off of it. I don't know. It's a very interesting app.
Yeah, the difference between Instagram and Facebook to TikTok is that what you said, it's the social algorithm. It's trying to make it relevant to your social people, which actually makes it narrow. Then it's like, well, we know your people only like this content or this content, where it's TikTok is like, you get in a vein and that's it. If all of a sudden you started talking about raising petunias or whatever, the algorithm would get confused. And kind of saw this with YouTube and Matt Light, who was on my podcast, where he was about new construction in Florida, new construction. And he's like, oh, I'm going to do this other thing that's really cool. And it sounded cool. And it flopped because the algorithm says that's not what your people are looking at. So that content, that's why TikTok is kind of that even, I can't all of a sudden think about word, just even playing field. Yeah. How many clients have you gotten off TikTok, if you know off the top of your head?
So I was trying to quickly figure that out because I thought you might have a question about that. And I want to say we've production wise, because I did some rough numbers, and this could be a little bit off just because I didn't pull my numbers this morning, but I think we've done about 7 million off of TikTok.
Wow.
Could be more than that. That was just a really quick, just penciling out this year's already and a little bit of last year's, but yeah. So
are those leads much warmer because they feel like they know you?
100,000%. Like there was a day a few weeks ago where I think I had 4 people in like a matter of 24 hours reach out to me like, hey, Ann, we follow you on TikTok. We're going to be buyers. Hey, Ann, we're thinking about doing a buy sell. And they're from all over. Like we get relocation people, but we also get local people. I've had a lot of people say, gosh, when I'm on TikTok and I search Portland, your face shows up everywhere. So yeah, the algorithm is putting me in front of people that are searching for this area's content. Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, we actually about a month ago, we met a client off TikTok and had him in escrow in 3 days. It's crazy. So, and it's random. I mean, some days, weeks go by, I don't hear from anybody, but it's just staying consistent. It's just one of those things where you can't really predict when it's going to produce, in that realm, but you have to stay consistent. I will say, if you show up, and again, this is always something I try to do, but I get busy too, like everybody else, or sometimes I just want to get off social. But if I'm producing content on that app every single day, I can almost guarantee I'll have a reach out within a week. Almost. Wow. It's just that you have to stay super. And if you're even more consistent, like last year, there were days when I would do 2 or 3 TikToks in a day consistently. And then the algorithm loves that. So then they put you in front of more people, and there's just more opportunities to have reach outs. So if you can be really consistent, you can do really well on that app. And all of my realtor friends from all over the country on that app are doing insane business. I mean, I know of a couple agents I know 2 right now that have done between 20 and 30 deals off TikTok just this year alone. So it's pretty powerful.
Wow. So do you use hashtags? Is there any other SEO little tricks or anything you do in your bio? Anything there?
Yeah, I do hashtags for Portland and just areas of town, so you definitely want to make sure you're always hashtagging location. And then topics, like one of several of the viral TikToks that I've had have been because I had like if you talk about the housing market, so hashtag housing market 2023, market crash, any of those market crash videos do really well. People always, of course, want to hear about, I guess, salacious stuff. TikTok loves the salacious stuff. So if you do a lot of videos on those hot topics about the market crashing or interest rates or whatever, it's going to push you out there in front of more people, because more people like the doomsday stuff, or they like the really controversial stuff. But with that comes a very I think the one you referenced where I got like $3 million views was the comments got so out of control, I couldn't keep up. I don't even think I've read all the comments. It was like, and people were attacking people. Like TikTok is people really can be, not so friendly on that app as well. So you just have to ignore it and just be like, whatever.
Kind of like video Twitter or something.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard from other people that do YouTube. It's kind of the same thing on YouTube. Like when they do videos on Portland, of course, everyone has an opinion about Portland and what's going on here, but you just ignore it and move on. And yeah.
Oh, there's something I all started thinking about pictures of Portland, and then I all went downhill. So with TikTok, well, no, that's what I was going to ask you, is about the market. Let's jump off a little bit and talk about the market crashing.
Okay.
Is the market going to crash?
No. No, not this time.
It's almost impossible at this moment for it to crash.
Yeah. I mean, it's weird because it's like on TikTok, there are people that their whole substance is all about the market crashing, and you hear people give their opinions as to why. But I mean, the data, Mike, more than anybody probably, and I've seen the data, and I have PTSD from the last market crash. That was a market crash, and when you go through something like that, you always have this humble sense that something can happen that you couldn't foresee. And certainly last year, there was a moment or two where I thought maybe, right? I think a lot of us did. We just didn't know where things were going. When we came around the corner of 2023, it was very clear that we are not in a market crash, that there is still a very strong demand for housing. And even if housing slows down, it doesn't mean housing isn't something people need every day, right? I mean, I think that's one thing that we all have to understand is everybody needs a roof over their head, whether it's a rental or they're buying their property, and the population isn't shrinking. It's, growing, especially in a lot of the cities. And here in Portland, I always say it's we have that urban growth boundary that has kept our ability to urban sprawl and go crazy with building. We just don't have enough inventory. And I don't know that we're ever going to fix that to the degree we need to really see what people want it to have. Everybody wants it to be where we're back to fair playing fields. There's plenty of inventory and great interest rates,
Yeah.
but just because we want that doesn't mean that's going to happen. And it could be the opposite, where we just stay in a very low inventory climate for years to come. And of course, what that does is sort of push up our prices, whether we like it or not, or whether it's fair or not, or whether interest rates are high or low or whatever. So what an interesting place to be, huh?
Well, what I'm really scared about is that we will become a renter society. We're very big into, we've really pushed into subscriptions on every platform that they can. They want us to do a subscription. And like you said in that one video, is like, look, if we don't have a housing crash, I'm not sure how first-time home buyers get into homes.
Yeah.
Not that I want to wipe out trillions of dollars of equity, but it's gotten nuts. And go ahead.
I was going to say, I just read something the other day that talked about, I think it was BlackRock, if I'm not mistaken, where they're going to start to sell our equity positions. Like, it was a very interesting article about how they're going to try to capitalize on this, lack of inventory. Anyway, I probably should read up on it more before I even speak about it. But I thought, boy, this could really change in the coming years. It's almost like the chasm between the people that have houses and the people that rent is getting bigger and bigger, so yeah.
And they're building these developments, like housing developments, single family homes, to rent them specifically, because they'll make more money on essentially rent to subscription. They'll make more money than the one-time shot. And as long as these rents are so high and people can't go in and buy a home, it just makes sense to go build rentals. And I don't know how anything shifts, but that's my big worry. I don't know economics well enough. I just play with numbers and stuff, but that's my concern right now, is that we just get stuck in this rental society.
Yep.
And I've got a niece who's 25 with 2 kids and a partner, and I don't see how they buy a home. I don't see how things but I just don't see prices dropping at all. After the recession, nobody built, or not at any scale that it mattered. And we're so far behind. And Portland, as much as I'm glad that we did not get destroyed like Phoenix and Vegas, places like that, man, they really need to open that urban growth boundary, because otherwise we're not going to have affordable homes.
Yeah. Well, I have a friend that she works at Lennar. She's a new home sales, and they're selling like hotcakes. And of course, the new stats are, last year it was 22% of buyers were buying new construction. This year it's 32%. It's like jumped to 10% because they have the inventory right now, right?
Yeah.
And she was saying they have like 400 homes coming up and they're just buying land, and I think Warren Buffett, I just read that Warren Buffett's like dumping a bunch into construction because he sees that as the future, right? I mean, they're the ones buying the land that are building. So if all these people are sitting at, sub 3% interest rates, who are not going to be moving, they're not going to be creating the inventory, then new construction is going to be one of the big players in that inventory that people are going to be, potentially forced to buy. So
we have some crazy times coming up.
We do.
One of the things that I want to talk to you about is you have some great relationships with other agents. And I think that that's one of the things that also lends to your success. Masterminding, reaching out with whatever. How have you built those relationships, and how important has that been to you?
It matters to me to have relationships with other agents, both local and outside of the area. I am a creature of I need to have relationships. I always appreciate being able to reach out to some people and say, hey, what are you seeing out in the market? How's your year going? Talk about something, bounce an idea off of them. I always appreciate, mentoring and helping another agent along who is either just getting started or they've been in it a little bit, but they need help. They need like a mama bear, and I love getting the reach outs from agents where they call and they need advice, or they need to know what's the best, what would I do or help them understand to do in a certain transactional situation. But we do a lot of referral business outside. We get tons of calls in every year from agents around the country, just building those relationships as well within our company or outside of it. So yeah, I just really like cultivating relationships with other agents, especially agents that are in this business and they're either career agents or they're, there's something about that camaraderie, where we can all kind of like have a place where we can talk about what's really going on and feel a sense of like, okay, I'm not alone in what I'm seeing out here or what I'm dealing with. I just have always loved that. That's something that I value. And so I know you and I were a part of a mastermind a week ago, and it just really filled my bucket. And so my goal going into the fall and winter months is to have more of those, just because I think everybody walked away and just felt really, it's kind of a lonely business in that, you're out there in the field, you're working with your clients, so you're not really lonely, but you are going through things that you can't talk to your clients about, or that you're dealing with this business or the market, and you're, even just like last week asking all the agents, like, what are you seeing out in the market? And having them be able to share, and you're like, yeah, I'm seeing that same thing too. And maybe talking about, well, what are some of the strategies or things you're doing differently to, handle that situation or what the market's doing.
That's actually one of the reasons that I've started these last couple podcasts with what's working for you right now, because I think that's what people really want to know right now, because it feels like everything's broken and it's always something new that they're looking for. Oh, I had a good one right there and I lost it. Oh, so I think what's great about the masterminds or those relationships is because if you ask the average agent, oh, how you doing? Great. I'm doing great. Everything's fine. And they're dying on the inside, or everything fell apart, or they haven't sold anything. And when you have these relationships, you have the real inside knowledge. You have, there's someone we both know who had great last year, and this year's just been kicking their butt and they're way off. 100. And so because they feel comfortable, they're like, hey, this is what's going on. And everything in real estate is a lagging indicator. The closings, the graphs, and all. This is why I do my stats every day to get the update stuff. And I think those relationships, we get so many people get into real estate, kind of what you're saying before, butting heads. Yeah. And it's not a fight. We are cooperating brokers. And when I look at the successful agents, it's usually because they have a group of agents around building each other up, or that they can mastermind, learn from. So totally. I just think that's so important. You mentioned with the mastermind is, hey, what's working for you now. Some people who get into the business in more recent years think, well, what worked in the past doesn't work now. Is there anything that stands out to you that did work in the old days that doesn't work now?
So glad you asked. I hear a lot in this market. Everyone's looking for an easy button, or they want to run off and go buy a bunch of leads from like Zillow or whatever. And I'm not saying that's wrong, each to his own. And sometimes there's a strategy around that. I was just thinking about this morning. I was like, nothing beats the good old fashioned picking up the phone and knowing how to talk to people. You can't beat it. If you're doing that in conjunction with marketing, you're like lethal in this market. In my opinion, I know the sales are down and it feels for agents a lot harder to find business, but it's not hard if you're one of those agents that learns the skills, going back to skill set, not just about talking to your clients, but how do you talk to potential business opportunities and building relationships with people. Like, so many agents bypass that step because they call it cold calling or lead generation, or it's masked in something like, I don't want to door knock, and I don't want to make cold calls, and I don't want to do this, and I don't want to do that. But when it doesn't have to be called that and have a bad name, but you can still learn how to do those skills, because those skills, like, it's paid off for me huge this year. Like, yeah, I do TikTok and get business, and I do a lot of stuff that people go, that's fun, that looks cool to do. But I'm still doing the unsexy stuff. I'm still doing the phone calls and the follow-ups and having those conversations that turn into appointments. And that's the way we did it back then. There was no Zillow in the last recession. I think Zillow came out in 2010, if I'm not mistaken. You had to learn the basics. And honestly, this is going to sound a little like open houses. We've had open houses this year that have been highly productive for our team. We've converted a lot of people off open houses because you can now. People are coming into those open houses and they want to know who knows what they're talking about. And if you can do an open house with intention and purpose, you can walk away successfully from open houses. Sign calls, like all these old school methods, like they have come into play this year. So what I would encourage people to do is, like, don't look at like going and putting a bunch of money into some system or lead system yet until you've really mastered some of the basics. because those are typically free or at no cost, maybe your time, but it works. And you can build a really strong business off that right now, in my opinion.
Well,
so yeah.
You said earlier about your team was you ended up keeping it simple. And what happens is we sometimes try to get too fancy. And look, all that stuff you did in the recession and afterwards gave you the content to talk about on TikTok. If you didn't have that, this is why it works for you. It's because it's all authentic. It's all real. So if you don't have a good foundation, you're not going to have a strong house. And that's the thing is those skills are the foundation. And I was talking to Jaron, who's going to be on the podcast, and he's kind of said the same thing is he did Zillow and didn't quite have his skills where they needed to be because he got those early on because that's what worked for him, the way he's transitioning over to real estate. And that's an interesting part is you have to have the basics. If you don't have the basics, nothing else is going to work.
Yeah. And to that, it's like, if you're a realtor who's done really well the last few years during the pandemic, because you knew how to put deals together and you knew how to work hard and all that stuff, but now you're floundering, oftentimes that's because your foundation is not set, meaning you have to take a step back and go, what am I not doing that I need to be doing that if I did it, I could fill those gaps and keep my business running, consistently. And oftentimes it's just really re-engaging with skill set on how do I make my calls? How do I do my follow-up? What systems and time management am I doing to make sure that I'm not dropping people through the cracks or that I'm really doing what I need to be doing? Like that to me is like the indicator for a lot of agents that your business is not built on a solid foundation is when you don't have those basics. Because a lot of the agents there's actually a lot of agents succeeding at a high level in this market too. Like, I mean, we hear more about agents struggling, but I see a lot of agents that they've got those really good foundations that they've learned those skills too, or they're learning them quickly or teaching their teams to do that quickly. And they're taking up some market share right now. So not everybody is on the struggle bus. Some people are just choosing, and that's what it is. It's making a mental shift to say, okay, what worked the last 2-3 years, it's not going to be what's happening right now. So what is working? And maybe it's listening to some of us older agents who've been in a long time who can tell you, like, through any market I've ever been in, fast or slow, I've always been able to lean on those basic fundamentals because they carry you through. And then everything you do with like marketing and video and social and all this other stuff is just like another, fundamental, of sorts, but like get your basics down, because a lot of agents want to jump into the sexy stuff only, or they don't want to do some of this other stuff or learn it because it feels too uncomfortable. And then they just their business is really like, they just really flounder. So it's just really kind of getting back to basics.
I remember when COVID hit and one of the leaders came out, they did a webinar talking about, dealing with COVID because everything shut down. It looked like 2008 all over again when the banks closed for 10 days.
Yep.
Everything went nuts with Lehman. And so they're like, look, you need to cut everything. And I know you were one of those people, you started cutting left and right, like a lot of the leaders did. Yeah. And what they said though is, and I appreciate this, is that, look, you're spending money to not talk to your clients. You've got this service, that service, that service. You're trying to do anything so you don't actually have to talk to your clients. You want to pull them in with this lead thing. You want to have this thing automate. You want to have this thing over here. You need to talk to your people. So I think for a lot of agents, if that's what you're doing is trying to just avoid that, you're going to have trouble.
Yeah. Yeah. You have to, in this market, be the thought leader for your database. Like one of the things that's really worked for me very well is we send out an email to our database of 5,000 people. Now, only about 800 of those are our real database, people that know us and we know them. The rest are just a hodgepodge of different people that, we've, accumulated over the years. But every single week they get a piece of content from us, mostly in the form of video, but also newsletter, where they get to hear from us on what do we think the market's doing and all the things going on, as well as showing our successes and different things about that. And I think that is you create the narrative for your database. If they don't know what's going on out there, if they don't see you on the regular, because like social media only goes so far. I mean, most of my database is not on social media or we're not connected there. There's a lot of them there. So that's important. But I get people that come off my email newsletter all the time that have questions or want to sell or whatever. And it's like, you never know who you're speaking to until they reach out to you. And then they're like, hey, guess what? My mom needs to sell her house. We're moving her into assisted living. Can you help me? And they'll email right off the newsletter. They'll just say, hey,
Mhm.
Ann, great video. We really need to talk to you about selling mom's house,
Wow.
But your database, whether you know it or not, is watching if you're sending that stuff out. So like, I can't speak to it enough. Like, you should be sending something out every single week to your database that's rich in content. And my virtual assistant puts together the newsletter, but we work together on putting that content together because I want it to be really rich every time we send it out so people actually open it and read it. And that's a staple for us in our business as far as touching our database and people and, interacting.
I like the weekly emails. I think that they're important. The one
Mm-hmm.
that I do and suggest people, because not everyone has an assistant or the funds or whatever, but here at EXP, we've got KV Core. And so
Mm-hmm.
we went, when I was director of sales for Beltran Properties, we had a monthly email, nice and pretty, but a little overly done. But that was my opinion, not theirs. And I talked them into doing the weekly email, and it was really simple. You just put a picture of the area, something local at the top,
Sure.
because I like stats. I'd throw in some stats. Most people don't have to do that. And then I had links to the different cities and said it was the market report. And that lands you on a page on KV Core that has 3 homes, the least expensive, most expensive, most popular. It was usually the least expensive. Told you how many, told you different, and had like 2 graphs and then some other stuff. We went from doing a monthly email to this one, very basic. We actually had more people opening per week. And here's the thing is, your database may not want to buy today, but every week, if you've got your headline and they see your name every week, you just went from 12 touches to 52. And when the time is right, they will open it. The surprising thing for us is they were clicking on Oregon City. We did not do a lot of business in Oregon City. We're known for Wilsonville and Tigard. And so like, oh, that's interesting. We've got some Oregon City that's popping up, maybe, and that gives you information to do things. So for anyone who's nervous about a weekly email, do it. Second of all, if you don't have the ability to do something at the level that Ann does, this is a very basic thing that just about anyone can do. But they're useful, and I love the story you're telling about people just reaching out to you that way.
I tell everyone, like, don't overthink anything. Like, you'll get paralysis. You won't do it. You won't finish it. I was like that once upon a time where I was like, it has to be perfect. And then it wouldn't be perfect and I wouldn't send it out, And now it's like, there are some weeks when we're so slammed and I haven't had time to really like focus on how great I want it to be. And we're just like, you know what? Here's what we're going to do. Boom, boom, boom. Regular stuff. It's not going to look the way I don't care. Just get it sent out. Like, it doesn't matter, and at the end of the day, it's just about people have an expectation. And there's a level of trust that they have with you when you show up regularly. Yes. If you stop, or if you're really inconsistent, they lose that trust. And you're, like you said, you don't know when people's buying and selling cycles are going to be, especially in this market. It's probably longer. It's probably fewer and far between, but all the more reason to send them something consistently. I think a lot of agents think, well, I don't want to overdo it. I don't want to send something out every week because they're going to be sick of me. Let them be sick of you. Most of the ones are not going to unsubscribe. I did a little experiment actually a few years ago. I called my database and started asking a bunch of people, like, do you get my video emails? About 90% said they did, but some were like, oh yeah, I do, but I'm so sorry. Like, I don't have time to watch them. That's fine. As long as you're getting them, right? Then some people are like, oh, I love them. They're great. You do a great job with it. And some people are like, oh yeah, I think I still do get your emails. I just, like, the responses were all over the board. And the whole point of it was, all I cared about was that they're still getting the email. And if you track stats, so people who get my emails, I can see who's opening them, who's watching them, And there was a time when I could open up those stats monthly, and literally there'd be somebody reaching out to me about selling or buying or whatever, who'd be starting to watch those videos who hadn't watched them before. So you can actually track that stuff really well with being consistent. And so I just always encourage agents. I'm like, the hardest part about being a realtor is you might have somebody in your database and you have no idea if they need to buy or sell. They might not have any idea, but then next week, all of a sudden, their brother calls and says, I'm moving to Portland, or they'll hear about, all of a sudden their life changes. They've got a relocation or something, and now they need to talk about selling or whatever. Like people know on a dime what they're going to be doing, and sometimes they think maybe when our son graduates from high school, we'll think about selling or whatever, but you need to be there consistently so that when that moment hits them, or they hear about somebody who needs your help, that you're the first person they're thinking about to do it, because it is so hard to keep up with a database. Let's be honest. If you have hundreds of people in there, which we all do, I don't know any realtor who is really successfully calling their database on the regular. If we're all really being honest, it's too hard to do it when you're busy and all that, but you can send them stuff of content and you can reach out and do things, client parties, whatever, but that email is like your audience at that time. And social media is a backup audience, right? So I have a lot of people in my database who follow me on social I got a referral about 3 weeks ago from a client that follows me on social. I didn't even know if I had her in my database, but she knows of me. I've sold her properties before, but it's kind of like a twofold to do both. You just kind of have to be where they can see you and their eyeballs are at. So yeah.
And don't worry about people unsubscribing, because look, if they're going to unsubscribe, they don't really care about you that much, or they just don't want your email and you didn't affect the relationship. They are not leaving because they're annoyed by your email.
Right.
You don't have enough of their attention or trust if that email caused them to leave you. I have someone in my coaching who unsubscribed to my Roaring Agents email. And I was like, oh, that hurt a little. But then I was like, oh, they're still coaching with me. So I guess they just don't want the email. So it's fine.
Yeah.
So we assign these values. It's like, look, get rid of them if they don't want to be there. You don't want that false feeling that, oh, I've got this many people. No. And I've got plenty of newsletters that I don't unsubscribe to, still let them go through. And every once in a while, if that's interesting, I'll click on it.
Yeah. And I have the same thing. I get barraged by people. That's okay. Most of the time I ignore it, delete it. And then every once in a while, I'll open it. I'll take a look at it. And I always am impressed with the people that kind of customize. They don't send the template. Like, I think our industry is guilty of sending out these very templated emails that, like, sorry to say it, but lenders tend to be the worst culprits, because I'll get like 3 of the same exact emails from 3 different lenders and they look identical because their company makes it for them, Right. But to me, it's like so disingenuous. It's like, I would rather somebody not send that out, but like take the time to and it doesn't have to be a lot. If you don't have a lot of business going on, you don't know what to say. It's just keep it as basic as you can. That's just, hey, you could do a story on your recent closing. You could put the market stats in there with hyperlinks. Like, it doesn't take a lot to make a nice newsletter that somebody would engage with.
There's something you said earlier about, overthinking it and trying to be perfect. And there's a quote I heard that I want to share with you, which is, perfection is the lowest standard. Because if you don't get it done, it doesn't matter.
That's brilliant.
The idea to flip that frame, that it's actually a low standard, is amazing. I love that.
Yeah, I do too. That's good.
You and I talked a month or so ago. You called me and we got into this conversation about agents and what skills they need and whatever. And what we ended up really talking about was that it's not new skills they probably need. It's they need to actually just go do the thing. They need either accountability, they need to understand their why or whatever. Any thoughts on that? What you see out there with, people just trying to find a new skill and not doing the thing they need to be doing?
What I think it lacks in our industry that keeps agents from between failure and success is execution. It's just execution and consistency. Those are 2 things that if somebody were coming into this business or was struggling in their business, like, how consistent are you and are you executing? I think I shared with you, I've talked to a lot of realtors who've reached out to me this year because their businesses are down, they're hurting, they don't know what to do, they're whatever. And I always say, I'm like, what are you doing consistently? And most of the time it's nothing. Or it's like, well, I tried that for a little bit and then I stopped. Or they know. You can ask them, like, well, what do you want your business to look like? Oh, well, I should be doing X, Y, or Z, but they're just not executing, So it's execution and consistency. Those are your lethal combination to get your business back on track and to keep it consistently. But it's like, look at your schedule and decide, what do you need to be doing consistently and executing on regularly? Those are 2 things. And because we all know what to do. There's a million real estate podcasts. There's a million YouTube videos. There's mentors and people like, you know what to do, and you probably are not choosing to do it. And so it's not simple, but it's easy, right? That's what they say. It's not simple, but it's easy. And so what I do every day, sometimes I'm like, man, I hope somebody's going to watch this video, right? Or I'll post a TikTok and think, God, nobody's going to care about that. I think about those things too. I feel like sometimes I'm doing things consistently that nobody gives a rip about. But at the end of the rainbow, so to speak, people are watching, people are listening. It matters. Like, it's just getting into activities on the regular and doing them and doing them and doing them and trusting. I mean, there really is a faith to this business. The things that you're doing today are going to show up in 90 days from now, right? But nobody's guaranteeing you that something's going to happen while you're doing it, right? I mean, that's the hardest thing is like, it's like when you're on a 9 to 5 and somebody's paying you every 2 weeks, like what you do that day gets a result in 2 weeks. In the real estate business, it's the faith of what you're doing today that's going to pay out in the next 90 days. And that is really a hard struggle for people to see that connection until you've done it consistently relentlessly for a long, long period of time. It's like, oh, that's crazy. I have something in escrow because of something I did 6 months ago. Like, there's nothing cooler in my mind than when you look at who you have in escrow and you realize that the activities that you did first and second quarter were a direct result of having that business. But it's usually a longer period of time for there's longer sales cycles happening right now. It takes longer for a house to sell. It's taking longer to get a buyer through the process. All the more reason you need to be consistent and executing, because if that's the case and you need to make sure your numbers stay at a certain point where you can stay in this business, you need to be doing it hyper regularly, hyper actively, not just dabbling or doing it when you feel like it. It's not that market. It's not the market. You should be doing things only when you feel like it. You need to be doing them all the time. So,
well, this is why Roaring Agents, the training website, is just free, because it's all out there. I'm just trying to make it
all out there,
easy to access. It's not the skills. The coaching is about the execution and implementation and getting over the limitations, fears, whatever it is that's holding you back. For you, have you always been driven in implementing, or was there some point where you had to figure out how to get yourself there?
I have a natural drive inside that I think gets me going and helps me stay accountable. But I will say it's taken, look, I've been doing this for 22 years and I wasn't always like this, early in my career. I did figure it out probably sooner than later because, I started in the business when there was no easy button. It was all very basics and traditional business. And you had to keep a schedule. You had to stay consistent. But it's been a learned skill. And how many conferences have I been to? How many coaches have I had? But so nowadays it's like, I know what I need to do. It's just a matter of like doing it. It's just, but I will say this, if any agent out there struggles with this, which a lot do, right? Otherwise they'd be doing it. Coaching, get a coach. I really believe right now, anybody who is entering this business 100% needs to invest in a coach, because left to our own devices, we're not going to hold ourselves typically accountable. We're not going to see our blind spots. We need each other to get through this market. And it's never been a harder but easier business to be in. But you've got to have somebody that's championing you and being real with you. And even if you're an agent that's only been in this for a few years and you're not where you want it to be, get a coach. Like put the money and the time into that, because it is worth it. I think everyone should get a coach entering this business or being in this business that's not where they want it to truthfully. No joke.
I may turn that into an ad.
No, seriously, if you can't invest in yourself and know, I know a lot of really great people who are realtors that are just not getting this. They're not executing, but they do need somebody to hold them accountable and to be a part of this process to get them to that level. Cut the check and get a coach. You absolutely have to.
What I find is there's sometimes some shame associated with it. I know what I should be doing. I'm not doing it. And this is where they go, well, if I just get this one more class, if I just go to this one conference, it'll fix everything. And it's always an inside game, and they just haven't gotten there. Yeah. And there's one coach I saw online. It kind of drove me nuts. He's like, new people don't need coaches. I was like, there's an 85% failure rate who needs coaching more than new agents, which is why I came up with my sliding scale coaching, because almost all coaching is like $1,000. Then once you sign up for a year, I wanted to make it available for those newer agents who are struggling. So that's my own little soapbox. As we're tying up here, what you've given tons of great stuff. Is there anything else that you think agents should know about the world of real estate? Anything they should be thinking about to succeed?
You know, I think that no matter where you're at in your business, this is a great business. You can jump in, whether you're brand new or you're just reinvent yourself. Make a choice to say, I'm going to change with the market. One thing about real estate that has always been true is that it changes on a dime. And you have to have paradigm shifts constantly in this business. What worked for me 3-4 years ago, there's some things I'm not even doing now that were brilliant 3 or 4 years ago. You're constantly evolving, you're constantly changing. But if you enter a market like this, it can actually make you a really good agent and can turn your whole business around. Some of the best agents I know entered when the market was really tough. You know, I would say there's a bit of a disadvantage for agents who probably hopped in the business the last 3 years, just based on how dramatically different it is now. But that doesn't mean you can't reposition yourself and say, you know what, I'm going to start humble yourself enough to say, I don't have it all figured out. Even if you had you came off a few great years, trust me, even as a seasoned agent, there are times when I think, man, I thought I had it all figured out. And then the market shifts and I have to reposition everything. I have to go back to my financials. I have to go back to how I'm doing business and what I'm, the whole 9 yards. You have to be able to do that and paradigm shift on your own in order to say, all right, it's 2023, we're heading into 2024. Things are going to be a lot different. You can still have a lot of success, but you have to get real with yourself and start figuring out what's going to work for this new market. And we're in a new market. We're in a completely different era of how we're doing real estate now. So you have to make that choice to change. And I've seen a lot of agents do it and they take off running again, and they're successful even in this market where everyone's, business is down and everything. So it's just, to me, it's just a choice you have to make in your head. But a lot of times it's taking that ego out of it and just saying, all right, how do I do this business now in this new frame? Like, ignore what happened last few years. That was an anomaly. That's not coming back, but move forward with what is happening.
I started noticing in conferences in like 2017, 18, 19, all those people on stage, for the most part, had gone through the Great Recession. And when you look at who's talking about what they're doing now and who's kind of grabbing attention, it's the people who pivoted during COVID. And they said, this thing wasn't working, so I had to figure this out. And you're right. It's iron sharpens iron or something like that. Those hard times, this is where the great agents are going to have that next quantum leap. So I'm so glad we got to do this. We covered an absolute ton.
I know.
This was like its own little masterclass. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really, really appreciate it.
Pleasure. You're welcome.